Just to be in the car driving down here alone. Not worried about it.
And meet you. And what I learned more is just, couples just staying together in business.
So I can recover physically, so I can be sharp mentally. So if you're doing active listening, and particularly we all are looking for clients, when you're talking to a great client,
might sue them for anything like that, they'll close the door. So that extra money that you're saving on things like that is really important, especially in this economy the way it is, the way real estate is right now. So it's important.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you, give my hand. I know you've been, okay, come on, Fabulous,
I think what I got from it, and I was speaking with Robert about it this afternoon, was I thought it was really great how, even though none of us really knew each other prior to, for the most part, but our message was congruent throughout. That there was not just the theme of falling in love, but the information was consistent without us even having talked to one another and spoken to one another. The messages kept ringing through everyone's talks throughout the workshop, and I thought that was just good affirmation, that we're all on the right page.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I was happy to be here. I was happy to meet everyone. Happy to meet you. And what I learned more is just, couples just staying together in business and communication, how to stay, learn from each other, listen to each other. I learned a lot from you all for the prison program. That was good y'all doing. So I continue to get y'all strength to do that. I know that's a tough project. And just, keep it up. And thank you, y'all.
I learned out of all this is that how important it is for our time together. 35 years and we're still learning. We were tussling and playing in the room. Also that's all of that is important, and I learned that you never have arrived, you never learn it all, and that every moment is precious. And this is the first time we've done alone and away from our ministry, and wow. Yeah. So I was happy to be here with all of you, to meet all of you, and look forward to doing it again.
I enjoyed it because when you were so used to taking care of other folks and seeing after their needs, it's a good thing to get away. And I'm looking forward to this week, last week. And Friday couldn't get here fast enough. Just to be in the car driving down here alone. Not worried about, not thinking about no bills, not thinking about no clients, not thinking about just quiet time. And sometimes we take that for granted. That we get so wrapped up in everyday life trying to stay above water that we forget the basic small thing that means very, very, very meaningful. So when we started this ministry, or we started these different offerings of the ministry, I was listening to T.D. Jakes one day, and he said this, and it always rang into my ear. He said, when you're building a business or ministry, don't lose yourself. Because you can't lose yourself, you can't lose your marriage, you can't lose your business trying to accomplish this. And every time that we get overwhelmed, it'll always come up. You can't lose yourself in it. So I thank God for this opportunity. I thank God for allowing us to meet you and some things that we learned from Brother Robert about business, how to keep it separated from family members and everything. And I got to go back and get some things in order. So with that information that we learned, and I thank you for it. Thanks for meeting all of you. And God bless you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being on time, as Stephanie said. And my presentation is going to talk about, are you hard of listening rather than hard of hearing? Okay? Are you hard of listening rather than hard of hearing? So what I'm going to talk about is the difference between hearing and listening, talk about some behaviors that go along with that, and talk about how someone can move from hearing to really listening. Because I can admit that I'm not a closet hearer. You know, I'm out of the closet. I hear sometimes when my fiance Scott is talking, it's just noise, okay? When he's talking sometimes, I'll admit that. And I have to catch myself. So I'm going to talk about the difference between hearing and listening, give you some examples. Now I want you to be thinking about, have you ever just heard what your partner was saying and you weren't really listening to what your partner was saying? Because probably you have, and you may not have identified it. So I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, okay, which ones of you have only heard what your partner said, because you may not want your partner to know that you were only hearing and not listening to them. So, do you think is just about hearing?
It's a function. It's really just a function.
I'm sorry?
A function.
A function? Okay. And what do you mean by function?
I mean, it's a function of your body. You hear.
Oh, right. It's a natural thing. Right? Again, it's a natural thing. And if you're just hearing someone, are you actually involved in that conversation?
No, because you don't have to process. You choose what you want to process, which is what you select.
Absolutely. So when you're just hearing someone, you're not doing anything, right? It is, you're not involved in the conversation. And unless you take an action to get involved, it's just noise, right? It's background noise. It can be background noise. So therefore, hearing is a reactive kind of thing, right? Because it just goes by. It's just a reaction. You automatically hear. So it's reactive. But when we want to talk about is to go from just hearing, so remembering those things, and go from hearing to listening. So, and I'm going to talk about listening in two different ways. Basically, I'm going to get, when we're talking about listening, we're actually comprehending what someone's saying now, right? We're taking in what they're saying, and we're actually comprehending it. So we're going to start a dialogue with someone. So that is an intentional act, right? You intentionally listen so you can have a conversation. Because if you're not intentionally doing that, moving to listening, then once again, it's just noise. What else? Oh, and now we have listening, and then we have active listening. Now, what goes into active listening? Because that's a deeper type listening, and that is actually, as it says, an activity. So that means you are doing some things when you're active listening. So what are some things do you think go into active listening? Body language. And I'm going to get back to that. And you said a conversation. So you, like I said, it's intentional. Listening is intentional. Listening is proactive because you are going to get involved in a conversation. So listening is proactive. Body language, thank you. 93% of the way we communicate, or the way somebody picks up what we're saying, is through our body. That because we communicate, 55% of our communication is through our body language. Okay? So when we talk about body language, what are we talking about?
Facial expressions.
Facial expressions, and I see Katie making a facial expression toward Robert. So
I figured I should say it first.
Okay, because I'm very guilty of making facial expressions at the wrong time and the wrong facial expression. expression. So I have really curbed down on that, but I still do. So what else goes into active listening? I mean body language, I'm sorry.
How you're sitting, whether you are closed, whether you're open, sitting on the edge of your chair, making eye contact, nodding.
Okay, so you were well prepared for what I was going to do this evening, right? Because you just took everything. But no, and I know what you do. You understand what body language and active listening is. And she talked about a lot of good things, is eye contact. Now, eye contact is a very cultural thing. Very cultural. Because culture is my thing. I do culture. So eye contact is a very cultural thing. And I just want to quote you on that. So quote that to you so you can be kind of aware of that. And if we have time and you have questions about that, I can definitely tell you what I'm talking about. But for the American culture, we like eye contact because eye contact means what?
That you're engaged.
You're engaged in a conversation and you're listening. Because we don't like people not to look at us when we're talking to them, do we? No. Because if you're having a conversation with someone and they're looking around, then how do you take that?
Not listening.
Not listening, and what else?
It's a message of not rejection, but it can be a message of rejection. Like
Sure.
You're unimportant. What you have to say is not important.
Unimportant, what you say is not important. Great. What else?
Defensive.
I'm sorry?
Defensive.
Defensive, absolutely. Defensive. So, having active listening on your part and understanding those things that we've already said is, it can be a physical, you can be tired from active listening. You should be slightly exhausted from active listening because you're actually doing a lot of things, right? As a coach, and as I used to be a counselor on the ship, I was tired after each session, physically. And I had to space mine apart so I could recover physically so I could be sharp mentally. So if you're doing active listening, and particularly we all are looking for clients, when you're talking to a pre-client, then you definitely want to be doing some active listening, right? Because you want to hear what they're saying, you want to connect with them, so you want to hear as much so you can repeat and paraphrase. That's another thing that goes into active listening. And why do you want to repeat or paraphrase something that someone just said to you?
So that there's no miscommunication. Kind of solidify that, I know, is this what you meant when you said that, or say it back to them so that you understand that they understand what you said, you know what I mean? They understand that you understood them.
So they understand that you understood them and I understand what you were just saying. Okay, so that's what paraphrasing and repeating does. It shows that you're really interested in a conversation, again, you're engaged in it, and that's being proactive. And with listening comes responsibility and accountability. Okay, with listening comes responsibility and accountability. Because you're accountable for what they said to you and what you're going to do with that information, right? And you're responsible because you are there and you said you wanted to engage in conversation with them, so your responsibility is to engage. Okay, so listening is you have responsibility, accountability, and it is proactive because of the active listening. So does anyone have any questions right now?
Yeah.
Sure.
When we were discussing eye contact, I learned really from Mary Kay Ash, who was a great communicator, that you should look right eye to right eye when you're communicating with someone because it goes straight to the heart. That's a communication style that really goes beyond the actual eye contact and goes internally and makes you have a greater connection with that person. So whether it's personal or business, right eye to right eye is a tip for communication.
Okay, that's great. I had never heard that before, but that's like I do practice heart selling. And heart selling is definitely about speaking from the heart. So you sell from the heart. Because once you sell from the heart, you're actually doing a service. You're thinking service first when you do hard selling. If your body's just trying to get $1, how they're talking to you, I know I have. But if I'm talking to someone who I think is really caring about what they have to offer me and they're sincere about that, I can tell you for me, they can give me the greatest bargain in the world. But if somebody's just trying to sell me on it, then I'm not going to buy it. But if it's a reasonable price or even a little bit higher price, if they seem sincere and they're trying to serve me, I'll probably pay that higher price just because of the connection we had. So, Katie, that was an excellent point, and I thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else have any comments or anything where I am right now? Because you guys rock.
That's really good.
Thank you. But you guys are rocking. You're hitting it, and that's good. So it makes my presentation much easier, so that's why I ask questions. So I don't have to do all the work up here. Okay, now I want to talk to you about moving from hearing to listening. Okay? And I'm going to start this out with my own personal story real quick. I told you that sometimes I just hear my fiance Scott talking. It's just noise going by, noise going by. And I'll catch myself, and I'm like, I am not paying any attention to what he's saying. So, as I said, listening is an active, proactive thing. So I had to be proactive and start listening to what he was saying. And when you come in like about halfway in a conversation, how do you think that conversation is going to end when you weren't listening to the first part? Not good, because I'm going to make up something based on what I just started listening to. And he catches me every time. He goes, "You weren't listening to me, were you?" Like, you know, he can catch me all the time now because I'll come up with some crazy answer to what he was talking about at the end because I didn't even know what he said at the beginning. So I don't know how it all tied together. So I am very guilty of that, and I'm trying to, and I don't do it all the time, but there are some days when I'm tired, and he comes home, and he's still in the Navy, and he had a day where he wants to talk about it, and it's like, man, I'm out of the Navy, I don't want to talk, you know, I'm saying to myself, I'm out of the Navy, I don't care about the Navy anymore, I don't want to hear anything about the Navy. However, I catch myself with that, and it's like, but that's him, and he needs to talk about it. So me being his fiance, then I need to listen to him because that's why I'm here. You know, that's one of the things I should do is listen to him. So, but I do catch myself. And another thing you can, so when you're, and like I said, you have to make the decision to go from hearing to listening. That's a conscious decision. Because if you don't, you just keep listening, you just keep hearing. So to go from hearing to listening, you have to make that conscious decision right then. It's like, oh, I'm going to start listening and stop just hearing the words and hearing the noise going by. Okay? All right. So let's talk about some behaviors that show that you are just hearing someone and not listening. What are some behaviors that go with that? Just hearing and not listening.
Changing the subject in the midst of what we are very important.
Okay. Changing the subject because you weren't listening and you have no idea what's going on, right? Good. What else would be an example of just hearing? What are some behaviors that are just hearing? Usually no eye contact, right? Because remember, as Americans, in the American culture, we like that eye contact. So if somebody's talking to you and you are, odds are, that means that you are not listening. Okay, so you're just hearing. And sometimes people are obvious like that. They just turn their head and it's like, what are you doing? You know, I'm trying to talk to you. All right, what is another example of just hearing behaviors?
Well, I'll give you one that isn't, but it's kind of anti everything there. It's one of those that if I'm in discussions and we're actually brainstorming, it's based on the premise that, you know, oftentimes the best ideas happen in the middle of the night when you stop thinking about it. So I actually have a habit of trying to self-distract. So I am paying attention. I may be I do something else, but I'm listening because that self-distract because I don't convolute the thought with the thought. It becomes a free idea to go at. So in some cases, I have to explain to people sometimes, I am paying attention, I am listening, I am processing, but the way I process it is if I self-distract, I can probably add to that idea or that thought. Now, if it's a conversation, it's a conversation.
Right.
Brainstorming is a different story because
Right.
I tend to actually add to it. So,
Right,
you know,
yes.
But that would, by nature, look to be a hearing component when I really am listening.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's true. Thank you so much, because that is very true. If you're doing something else, that tends to be when someone's talking to you, if you're doing something else, that looks like you're not paying any attention to them whatsoever when they're talking to you. Whether it is typing, whether it's you're trying to write something down on the board or something or whatever, and somebody's talking to you. And or on a personal note, if you are just watching TV and you don't give them any attention, right? Now, that happens on both sides, men and women. Scott likes NASCAR. Now, even though I'm from Kentucky, I was not a NASCAR person. So NASCAR was on in the house Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. That was the TV. And NASCAR goes on forever. You know, sometimes it's like 3 hours or so, and it's like, oh, cars going around and around the same direction. What is it? So I don't talk to Scott during NASCAR because he's not going to hear me. I mean, he's not going to be listening to me. He's just going to be hearing me because his focus is on whatever's on TV. I am a huge college basketball fan. UK all the way. As you know, UK is #1 in the nation. We've only lost 1 game, so those of you who are college basketball fans, remember that. But I am a huge UK basketball fan. When a UK game is on, he knows, that's not the time for you to be talking to me, for me to listen to you, because I'm concentrating on the game, right? So those are times that you know that somebody's not even here listening to you because they're concentrating on something. So that's another way that you can tell that someone is just, hearing you and not listening because they are focused on something else. Can you think of anything else that shows? Yes?
I think sometimes it's easier to tell a person's doing this and sometimes it's not. It's whenever they're already thinking about what they want to say in response to what you're saying without listening to what you're saying. First, I'm guilty of it a lot. But you can see them like they're ready to speak. They're just waiting on the edge of their seat, just waiting for you to take a deep breath. And that's a sign that someone's not really, they're not listening. And it's an exercise. It's a tough thing to get out of that habit.
Right, and that brings up an excellent point, Katie, because some people, that's how they do listen. That's actually a listening style. That they hear what you're saying initially, and everything else falls off. So, like you said, because they prepared the response based on what they heard initially. And so everything else is not worth anything to them, but that could change the whole conversation, what they said after that. So if you already have your answer prepared at the beginning, your answer could be crazy, right? And so that's how somebody can tell, like, what is she talking about? Because that's not what I wanted to hear. That was not my question. So that is a good point, that some people listen. That's actually a listening style. Yes?
Timing. When you're trying to talk with the person and you want them to hear you, if it's a bad time, they're not going to hear you. If emotions are high, tragedy, they're not going to hear you. So timing has a lot to do with whether you hear or not.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Sandra. And that's true. And that's something that we need to be conscious of, too, with clients. Okay? Because if a client is coming to you, whatever your business is, and they are feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling lost in their business, they're feeling lost in their life at that point, you really need to listen to them because they need to get all that out before they're going to listen to you. Okay, and we talked about that yesterday, that cleansing. But you have to be conscious of that in the business world when you're talking to possibly a pre-client or you have a client and they just bust in, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is what's going on, and I don't know what to do. Well, you need to let them get all that out. All that needs to come out first. You listen to what they're saying, then you go back and hit some of the key areas in there after they've calmed down. So emotions, definitely, timing is important. Yes?
Sometimes I feel that when you're in business and a person comes in and speaks to you off topic concerning business, you shouldn't more so. You might say something to that individual. Like say, for instance, I'm a hairdresser and barber. Somebody comes in and talks about their marriage. I'm not gonna talk about that. I'll listen to you because I'm in a position and I'm offering a service. I'm not no choice but to listen because I'm trapped in a little, 2x2 section. But I'm not gonna tell you, oh yeah, just go on and just be a husband, just walk away. Or like a person having a problem with their girlfriend. I've seen it happen personally. I've seen people give advice on certain issues. People look, they already know the answer to their questions. They ask me to get some type of validation.
Right.
Don't use me as an scapegoat because it's always going to come back that I said something.
That's right.
Versus you said something. So you're gonna try to use me as a scapegoat versus you being mentally strong enough to go on and say, you know what, I'm done with this relationship. You're going to use me and say, hey, you know what? I was thinking today when I went over to the mortgage person, he told me to go ahead and just leave because you didn't come home last night. And then the mortgage, then that husband might can pay you a visit. Trying to figure out what you got to do with their relationship. So in every instance, it's not sometimes good to add advice on top. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I haven't been to school for any type of psychology or sociology to the extent of aiding advice. So I'm just staying on top. And we there to talk about mortgages. That's why I'm gonna tell the person I'm just here to talk about mortgages. I don't know. You might see. I'm gonna give a couple of numbers, some referrals. Like Dr. So and so, Dr.
There's something wrong with you.
I have no advice for you at all. Period.
I got doctors on call, so if there's something wrong with you, and I think you need to go here, you need to go there. Okay, you're right. We shouldn't step out of our genius. That's what we call it. We all have a genius, and we shouldn't step outside our genius. We should do work within our genius, because when we do work within our genius, then we are stars. We rock. We rule, and we are going to do that service the best we can if we stay in our genius. So a tip for you is don't get outside your genius. Do what you know how to do and stick with that. So that is a good point. So you're right. Stick with the hair and leave the other stuff alone. Absolutely. Okay. I think I'm getting ready to wrap up here. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. Oh, I haven't really told you. Oh yeah, we did talk about that, moving from hearing to listening. And the first thing you need to do is make that decision to do that. And I have to come clean, and like I told you, I've come clean before with Scott to say, we need to start all over again because I'm sorry I was not listening to you. So you need to make the decision, and sometimes you really have to tell someone, this is in the personal, because in the business, you don't want to tell one of your clients, I wasn't paying any attention to you, so start all over. That's not a good practice. But in your personal relationship, to keep your personal relationship on track, then yes, go ahead and admit, I wasn't listening to you. So can we start this conversation again? That has worked, I know, definitely with Scott and I, because that's being honest. And we have a very honest, open relationship. Scott and I, we've only been together a year physically. We've been together for 10 years, but during those 10 years, we were both in the Navy and we were never in the same place except when we met. So we had 9 years apart. So communication was key to us staying together. We had to learn to communicate openly, and take the time that we did have to make sure it was